Welcome back to the Constitutional Clarion. This video continues my exploration of the problems in the Australian Commonwealth Government's Campaign Finance Bill that it's currently rushing through Parliament with the support of the opposition. In the last video, I did an overview of the bill and then focused on political donations. This time, I'm going to look at spending on electoral campaigns. Because of the complexity involved, I'm only going to look at this in relation to political parties and their candidates, rather than spending by third-party campaigners, which has its own issues. There are two effective limits on spending by political parties and candidates. First, electoral spending can only come out of a special federal campaign account that is held by the relevant party or candidate. Hence, in order to understand what you can spend out of that account, you need to know what money can go into that account. Now, first of all, one thing that does have to go into that account is all political donations, being capped donations that are received by the relevant party or candidate. Also paid into that account is the public funding that's given to parties and candidates based upon the first preference votes that they receive at an election, as long as they receive at least 4% of the total formal first preference votes cast in that election. Now, in this case, the bill will jack up the amount that's actually payable to parties or candidates per vote. Ordinarily, of course, you would only get that money after the election because it's based on the votes you receive in that election. And of course, nobody knows what that's going to be before the election. But you need the money in order to pay the bills for your electoral expenditure during the campaign before that election day. So in this case, the bill includes provisions which authorise the making of advance payments. But, and here's the important thing, only to parties and candidates that ran in the previous election, by reference to what they were paid out last time. This means that new independents or parties that did not run in the previous election, or even those that did run but didn't meet the 4% threshold to get public funding, do not have the benefit of being able to receive advance funding and having that put into their campaign account to pay for their electoral campaign. I'm assuming here that these advance payments of public funding are paid into the campaign account because rather oddly, I couldn't actually find the provision that says that. It's probably there somewhere and I can't find it, or maybe there's just been a stuff up. But anyway, given that all the rest of the public funding goes into the campaign finance account, I'm assuming that this advance payment does too. Okay, so what else can go into the federal campaign account so that it can be spent on electoral expenditure? Interest paid on the account, that can stay there. Bequests from people who have died, and importantly, money from loans can go in there. If you're a new party or a candidate with no advance funding and insufficient capped donations, you're really going to need a loan in there to be able to allow you to spend on your campaign. But there are some other rather sneaky methods of getting money into the federal campaign account. First, money can be transferred to a party's campaign account by any of the, quote, core members of its expenditure group, unquote. What that means is that branches of a party can transfer money amongst themselves and place it into that account. So if donations were lagging in a state, the federal branch could reinforce its campaign account in relation to that state branch by transferring money into it, no matter how large. Critically, this also extends to transfers from a party's, quote, nominated entity, unquote. Now, I can hear you saying, what's that? Well, a nominated entity is, effectively, a very rich fundraising body that funnels money into the major parties. In Victoria, for example, the Liberal Party has the Cormac Foundation as its nominated entity. The Labor Party has Labor Services and Holdings Proprietary Limited, and the National Party has the rather quaintly named Pillywicks Proprietary Limited. If you look, for example, at the Cormac Foundation, which is already registered by the Australian Electoral Commission as an associated entity, you can see from its returns that it earns millions from share dividends each year, and it pays millions out as donations to the Liberal Party each year. These payments would not be counted as donations for the purposes of the $20,000 cap. The nominated entity will be able to make transfers in unlimited amounts to the relevant party, and they can then be transferred into the party's campaign account for electoral expenditure. In contrast, independents do not have the option of even having a nominated entity. Only parties can have one. Independents are therefore stuck with a campaign account containing only the cap donations that they've been able to receive, and perhaps some loan amounts, while their competitors in the major parties have millions of dollars transferred over from nominated entities. Another disparity is that some of the public funding for administrative assistance that's provided to political parties that have representatives in Parliament, as well as independent members and senators, can also be used for electoral expenditure, such as the remuneration of staff. Again, new parties and new independents running in an election do not get this benefit. A final possible disparity arises because affiliation fees, subscriptions and membership fees, including annual levies paid by elected officials or employees of third-party campaigners and associated entities, can be transferred into their own campaign accounts. Now, this would include union affiliation fees and the high membership fees that are often charged to belong to business forums. Vast amounts of money are actually involved in this area. As far as I can tell, and I'm not absolutely certain about this, but it seems possible that to the extent that an associated entity is also a nominated entity, such money could then be transferred into the campaign accounts for parties. The bottom line is that established political parties end up with more sources of money flowing into their campaign accounts than independents or anyone trying to get elected to Parliament for the first time. Next, we come to the expenditure caps for payments out of the campaign account to pay for electoral communications involved in campaigning. So effectively political ads. At this point, having successfully annoyed both of the major parties with my commentary in my last video, let me do a clean sweep here by annoying the independents as well. Now, they tend to oppose caps because they got elected through spending vast amounts of money. But that doesn't mean that spending vast amounts of money in order to get elected is an inherently good thing. Caps on expenditure are really important to lower the unnecessary cost of election campaigns, both for the parties and for the public purse. They reduce the risk of corruption because parties have a limited amount that they need to raise, and they don't need then to prostrate themselves before donors. They aid parties and candidates in their financial planning and organisation because they can budget to raise the capped amount rather than engaging in unending competition for higher spending each election. And expenditure caps, if done fairly, and that is a big if, can help level the playing field and provide greater opportunities for newcomers, as it's no longer a case of whoever has the biggest war chest wins. The High Court has previously acknowledged the validity of caps on expenditure as long as they do not unduly burden the implied freedom of political communication. Political parties, candidates and third parties must still be able to run a reasonable campaign to inform the people of their policies so the people can give a genuine vote. Most political advertisements, however, do nothing of the kind, as it's very rare for a political ad to actually inform people of positive policies. But what of this bill? The proclaimed objects of the caps are set out in proposed section 302AKB as follows: to prevent Australian elections from being unfairly skewed by organisations or individuals with large amounts of money, and to promote equal opportunity for all individuals and other entities to participate in political debate. Well, that sounds good. So, does the bill live up to it? Well, not really. Again, I'm only looking here at parties, MPs and candidates, not third-party campaigners, because that's an entirely different kettle of fish. Now, in relation to parties and candidates, there's a cap on electoral expenditure that is targeted to an electoral division, in the case of a House of Representatives, or targeted towards a state or territory, in the case of a Senate election. That means that electoral expenditure for the dominant purpose of advertising a candidate by reference to their name or image, or which expressly mentions the relevant division or the Senate election in the state or territory, falls within this cap. Now, the annual divisional cap is $800,000. The Senate cap is more complex. It's comprised of a base amount of $200,000, which is then multiplied by the number of electoral divisions in the lower house in the relevant state or territory. Heaven only knows why. It seems seriously weird to me. But what it means is that the annual Senate cap for New South Wales is $9.2 million, while it's $1 million for Tasmania and only $400,000 for the ACT. If an independent senator is running, their annual cap is the relevant Senate cap for that state divided by 6, because you're 1 in 6 members being elected, or if you're in a territory, divided by 2. There doesn't seem to be any adjustment for a double dissolution, however, where all 12 Senate seats come up for election. At least not one that I spotted, but maybe it's hidden somewhere else in the Act. In addition to that, a political party may advertise on a national basis with respect to party matters generally, its leader, its policies, etc. Now, there's an annual federal cap for this of $90 million. This cap encompasses the divisional caps in relation to each House of Representatives election, as well as the Senate caps in each of the states and territories. So they all come under the one $90 million cap. But a political party could choose to spend below its divisional cap, for example, in its safe seats, or seats it doesn't have a hope of winning, and instead use that money under its overall $90 million cap to fund additional advertising in marginal electorates where those ads support the political party and its policies, but do not mention or show the relevant candidate or the name of the division, in order to avoid the $800,000 divisional cap. Hence, political parties can still potentially swamp a marginal electorate with party political advertising beyond the $800,000 divisional cap, as long as they don't show or mention their candidate or the division, and they still fall within the overall $90 million cap. But an independent running in that marginal electorate cannot do so, as they are confined solely to that divisional cap of $800,000. Overall, you can see that while the bill does have some measures in it that can contribute to fairness, there are some features of it that seem deliberately skewed to favour incumbents over new entrants at elections, and to favour political parties over independents. And that's not even to mention the existing structural disparities, such as the use of government advertising to support political parties that are in power with advertisements that inform the electorate of all the marvellous policies that the government has brought in. And not to mention also the advantages that MPs already get through the use of their existing staff, their offices, their facilities, and their communications allowances. The big question in all of this is whether, once you add up all these factors together, the High Court would regard this bill, if passed, as invalid because it skewed in favour of incumbents and was not reasonably appropriate and adapted to achieve a legitimate purpose. Only the High Court, of course, can tell us the answer to that one. But there's certainly an argument that could be made in any challenge brought before the High Court. Thank you again for watching the Constitutional Clarion, and as always, I look forward to seeing you again next time. Goodbye.